Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshop, where we get together in the middle of the week to learn more about technology. It's March. March is the month of backup. You're going to hear that from us week after week after week until we get to the last day of March. March 31st is going to be, or is, National Backup Day. And that's the day that we get everybody to do their backup. So we're going to give you a number of weeks of workshops and then hope that you do that. Today, we're really happy to have with us Chris Taylor, who's the president of the Ottawa PC User Group. He worked for the Canadian federal government for over 36 years in user and server support, IT infrastructure, and IT security. Chris has been active in community user groups for over 45 years. He co-hosts the very popular weekly Q&A sessions hosted by OPCUG. Chris has given over 540 presentations at the Ottawa Public Library on computer and camera-related topics. He has presented to 5 APCUG member groups and will give another 7 presentations this year. One of them's to my group next month. He has written articles for Glasswire Cybersecurity News and was on the community review board for the Sans Ouch Security newsletter. Today, Chris is going to kick off our month of backing up with talking about effective strategies for keeping your computer files safe. So I'll turn things over to Chris.
Thanks very much, John. I'm pasting into the chat. This will be going out to everybody who is on the call, the PDF of the deck, but if you don't want to wait for it to come to you through email, I did paste into the chat window a URL where you can pick up the deck that I'm going to be presenting today. And also my email address if you want to contact me for any reason. I will say before I bring up my deck, I am a Windows guy, and so the focus of the presentation is definitely going to be on Windows. There's some stuff that is cloud-based, which is irrespective of operating system, but I think it's important that everybody consider the capabilities that I'm going to be talking about, regardless of what your operating system is. So as I go through the presentation, if you think that a certain backup strategy makes sense to you, even if you're not a Windows user, I'm sure that there's a way that you can implement that within the operating system of your choice. So with that, I will bring up my share. Okay, so yeah, the title on this is WoW Backup Effective Strategies for Keeping Your Computer Files Safe. And what I'm going to be going through is, first off, why backup? Most of the people on this call, it shouldn't be a big surprise there, but maybe there's some nuances that some people might not have thought about. Then we'll look at different approaches to actually doing your backups. And then I have some other considerations about offsite backups, how many backups people should think about, and a few other smattering of additional information. I will say that the PDF also includes some additional slides that I'm not going to be able to get around to presenting on today. So by all means, you might want to look at the full deck. So axiom number 1. There's 2 kinds of people in the world: those who've lost data and those who will lose data. And this is pretty much a given, that pretty much everybody who uses computers for any period of time is going to end up losing data. Axiom number 2 is data that is in only one place is at risk of loss. If you lose that one file, you may not be able to recover that data except by recreating from scratch. Data loss can happen a lot of different ways. So you can have physical destruction of or hard disk failure. You could have an electrical problem, a surge that takes out your computer, including all the data on your hard drive. Could have a virus, could have a fire, could have a theft. You could accidentally delete or modify data. Oh, I just suddenly realized here, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to reshare because I have to enable audio, and I forgot to do that. So let me do the reshare and share sound. My apologies on that. So you could accidentally delete a file or modify data and save it to disk, overwriting the original, or various ways like that. Now I'm going to show you a short video that is from a photographer based in Oregon. This is a guy who understands technology well, has good backup processes, and is going to talk about how this can actually occur to anybody where you can lose data, even those who are very experienced. Oops. And why did that not come up? There we go. Okay.
But what I did, I was actually formatting a smaller hard drive, and I was multitasking and wrapping presents, and we had the whole holiday season happening and people visiting and kids sick and lack of sleep, and I clicked the wrong hard drive and I formatted my big Drobo. I formatted 18 terabytes of data, all my videos, these kinds of videos that I do, instructionals, videos from the field of epic things that I see with wildlife or landscapes and light, time lapse, photos, you name it, 17 terabytes. I formatted it. And when I tried to do a recovery, a lot of it was corrupted. So fortunately, I had the second Drobo with all the data. And right now you can see I'm moving my file with all my images that are in my library back across from one Drobo to the other. It's a little slow flowing through the computer and out from one through the processor and back to the other. It's going to take about 17 hours to move 10 terabytes essentially of photo data. But all that stuff's localized here. If it had been a complete crash, I could always go into Backblaze and request them to mail me hard drives with all that data. I'd have to pay a hefty deposit, which would be returnable once I send the drives back, but at least it's an insurance policy for total loss. And you know, my own stupid fault here, hitting the wrong button, not paying close enough attention, moving, multitasking in a way that I'm not great at, particularly when sleep deprived, but it just goes to show it can happen to anybody, so make sure you're backing up your data, preferably both locally and in the cloud.
So yeah, it's very important. It can happen to anybody. That's really important note on that. So when you're going to back up stuff, you have to have a place that you're going to back it up to. And so I list out here a few locations that you might be able to back up data to. You could have an internal hard drive on your computer. You could have either an SD card or a flash drive, or you could have an external hard drive. And you can see here the cost per gigabytes. The first and the last one are the cheapest ones by far in terms of cost per gigabyte. The only reason why I actually list SD card and flash drives is they can be used in a limited fashion to back up a limited amount of data, and you may have some lying around that you can use basically for free. But the best one by far is the external hard drive, and the reason is it gives you the large capacity, low cost per gigabyte, and you can separate it from your computer. So that provides you protection from things like the fire and theft and electrical surges and things like that. So I highly recommend that you concentrate on external hard drives as your primary means of backup. So what is actually on your computer? You have your operating system. In my case, it's Windows, but it could be Linux or Mac OS or whatever. You have your programs that you've installed on top of the operating system. And then you have your data. And the data icon, I think of as anything that you create on your computer. So why backup? Well, if your computer dies, you can buy a new one. No problem with that. Your operating system gets corrupted. No problem. You can reinstall it. It's your documents, your pictures, your videos, things like that, the information that you create that nobody else has copies for. So why not just back up your data? After all, really, it is the only thing that can't be replaced relatively easily. So it can be a solution for sure. Your data is what is critical that nobody else has. Your backups are much smaller and they'll run really quickly if you're just backing up your data because you don't include the operating system and your programs in your backup. But keep in mind that this is not backing up your operating system or your programs, and we'll come back to why that might be important to you. So if you do a manual data backup, you can just copy all your important files either to an external hard drive, flash drive, cloud storage, anywhere else off your computer. But it's a tedious process. So it's easy to forget it, to do it, and it's easy to miss some important files that are on your computer. If you just back up your data, think about whether you're backing up all your data. This is an example. I use Thunderbird for my email, and so it brings down all of the email off the email server and stores it locally. And this is where it actually stores it. And let me just, if you look here, it's under this PC, my Windows drive, drive C, users, C Taylor, and app data. That happens to be a hidden folder, roaming, Thunderbird, profiles, some random name that is generated by Thunderbird when I set up the profile, and then finally the mail folder. This is where my photo editor stores its catalog. And again, it's under that, that folder for app data, which is a hidden folder, roaming on one photo raw 2025 photo settings cache. So that's where the catalog is for my photo editor. All of the edits to all of my photos are stored in that. If I was to lose that catalog and I didn't have a backup of it, I would lose all the edits that I've done over years to my photos. Now, would anybody think that when they're backing up their data, that maybe there's some important places other than just documents, pictures, other of the areas that are set aside automatically by Windows for storing data? Would you think to look to these other locations when you're looking for important data that needs to be backed up? I think a lot of people wouldn't think of that. Okay, so you could have an automated data backup, which this overcomes the manual process where it's easy to forget. So you can configure a program to actually do your backups for you and let the computer do it. Some additional potential benefits that come from automating backups is you can get real-time backup where files are actually backed up as they are created or modified on your computer with very little delay. And you may be able to get file versioning where as you modify a file over time, every version gets saved as a separate entity that you can actually recover. So how does real-time backup work? So I'm working on my computer here and I save a file to my computer, in this case a Word document file, and you have a program that is actually monitoring for new or changed files, and it'll automatically copy that file to the backup drive as soon as it notices as a new file or a changed file. File versioning works every time a file gets saved, a unique copy gets saved, and you can recover any of those versions of the file. So here I have a document called budget.doc. It gets copied to the backup drive, but it doesn't get copied just as budget.doc. It gets copied as budget.doc and a timestamp that is part of the file name itself. The next time I save the file, it'll get copied with a new timestamp. The next time, and so forth. So every time you save a copy of that document, it gets saved onto the backup drive under a unique name so you can recover any one of those files. So I'm going to talk about in Windows how you can do real-time backup and file versioning with a program that's included with Windows called File History. It's built into Windows 10 and 11. It is somewhat lobotomized in Windows 11. Microsoft is making it difficult to use the program, and I'll have more information about that a little bit later in the presentation. It supports almost real-time backup. It can be as frequently as every 10 minutes that it looks for new and changed files. And it supports file versioning, so every time you save the file, you do get that unique copy saved that you can recover any one of the versions of the files. It's folder-based rather than file-based. So you specify a folder to be backed up, and it will back up all of the files and folders within that folder are automatically backed up. So some of the defaults, it'll do most of the folders underneath your profile in Windows, which is things like documents, pictures, videos, desktop, things like that. It backs up new or changed files every hour, and it keeps versions forever or until you run out of space on your backup drive. Some of the customizations you can do, you can add or remove folders. So if you have things other than under your profile that you want backed up, say you have a data drive that is separate from your operating system drive and you want to back up folders on that, no problem. In terms of frequency, you can change it anywhere from every 10 minutes to daily. And then in terms of how long the versions get kept, you can have until space is required, where it'll automatically clean up old versions to make room for new, or you can have it specified periods of time up to 2 years in length. So the initial setup, I'm going to take you through a pretty rapid look at how you actually configure file history in Windows. So you plug in the external disk drive you want to use for storing the backups, and then you run the Settings app. You go under Update and Security Backup, and you can see on the right-hand side, it's pretty blasé. All you can do basically at that point is add a drive. So basically, you're going to tell the program file history where it is you want your backups to be saved. So you click on that and it will come up with a list of available drives that you can use for file history. Notice that the C drive is not on the list, so you cannot back up to the operating system drive. In this case here, I'm picking up a drive Z, and it's basically empty. It's a 1 terabyte drive and it's empty. You can use a drive with existing data on it. There's no problem with that. Once you do that, it is working with its default settings. Now, I highly recommend that if you set it up, come into the more options, because you probably want to customize at least some aspects of the way that file history works. So here's the screen that'll come up, and you can choose things like backup the frequency. And so you can choose anywhere from every 10 minutes up to daily. And you can see that highlighted in red is what the default is, every hour. How long you want to keep your backups. These are the versions of files, and you can see that forever is the default, and you can do it everything from until space is needed or some discrete values for length of time. I highly recommend that if you're not using the drive for anything else, until space is needed is really the most useful, because it will keep the maximum number of versions of files that you can possibly have. And then if it runs out of space, it'll automatically in the background remove older versions of files to make room for new stuff. You can add a new folder. Again, if you have something that you want to back up that is not one of the default folders, you can specify it there. And then you can actually go in and you can remove files or folders if you don't want them. So in this case, you could right click on music, or what I right clicked on was actually saved games, and then I have the option to remove that from the backup. It'll no longer look to backup files in that particular folder. You can exclude a folder. This is useful because it backs up a folder and all subfolders. If you have a subfolder of a backed up folder that you don't want, you can actually exclude that as a subfolder. If you want to stop using file history, don't just unplug the drive and continue on your merry way. After about a week or so, file history will start complaining that it hasn't seen the backup drive for a while, and it'll implore you to plug in the drive. So if you want to stop using file history, come into the configuration here and click on the Stop Using Drive. It won't remove all of the backup files from the backup drive if you do that. So you can still actually go in and manually access files that are on there, but it will stop adding new backups to that drive. If you want to recover an old version of file, all you have to do is right click on it and choose properties. So in this case here, I have backup strategies PowerPoint file. I right clicked on it and I choose properties, and then there's a previous versions tab. And you can see here I have a huge number of backup copies of this file from different date and times that I actually saved that file. So I just choose the one that I particularly want. I can choose restore, which will restore it to its original location, overwriting the version that is there at that point in time. Or I can choose restore to if I want to restore it to a different location, and that will keep the current copy of the file so I could compare between the two of them or whatever I needed to do. What if you're recovering a deleted file? So actually, if I go back here a little bit, here, I say that I right-click on a file and I choose properties. Well, what if I've deleted a file accidentally? So I have nothing to right-click on. In that case, you go to the folder where the file used to be, and on the Home tab in File Explorer, I click on History, and it'll come up with an interface where I can use a rewind and forward and controls to go back through until I get back to where the file actually existed, and then I'm able to restore the file. Notice that there's no restore to because there's nothing it's going to overwrite, so there's no danger of losing data. It'll just restore it back to its original location. Especially if you have the settings set to keep files forever, which is the default, eventually you will run out of space on that backup drive. So you're going to have to manually go in and tell it that you need to clean up some of those older versions. So to do that, you go into the configuration options, you go to the advanced settings, go to cleanup versions, and then you choose the period that you want to actually clean up from. And it will keep everything more recent than that. So it'll clean up, in this case, any old versions of files that are older than 1 year. And then that'll clean that up, allow you to get that extra space to continue on backups. So file history in Windows 11. This is a little bit of a bad story. So Microsoft removed file history from the settings app in Windows. The only way you can configure it now in Windows 11 is through Control Panel, which is an older way of
Chris, I need you to unmute. I was trying to let somebody in.
Okay.
Somebody else did it and overrid. So
okay.
back up.
I was hoping I wasn't muted this whole time. Okay, so one of the problems with configuring file history in Control Panel is that it only backs up desktop, contacts, favorites, and libraries. So you can't arbitrarily add different folders on your computer. But libraries are special. So libraries are collections of locations of files on your computer. The default libraries are documents, music, pictures, and videos. You can't add new folders, but what you can do is add folders to a library, or you can even create a new library and then add folders to that library. So a little bit laborious to set it up, but once it's set up, you don't have to worry about it again. Second problem, the ribbon got removed from File Explorer at some point in Windows 11, and the ribbon was actually required to access file history for recovering deleted files. So the workaround on that is to go into the Settings app, in the search box, type in file history, and it will come up in the results panel for that, restore your files with file history. When you click on that, you will get that VCR type control where you can actually browse to find the files that you want to recover. So in this case here, I would just drill down and I find the file that I actually wanted to recover, and then I can restore that particular file. Third problem in file history, and this is a little bit of speculation on my part. So the only reason I can think of that Microsoft would have removed file history from settings is they're planning to remove it completely in the future at some point in time. They are trying to make it awkward for people to actually use it so that people will move on to using something else, which I know Microsoft really would like you to save everything to OneDrive. But they actually went to an effort to remove it from Settings app. So they must have had a reason behind that. Personally, I think it's time to look for a replacement for file history in order to do real-time backups and file versioning. The free and open source free file sync looks pretty good. I've been using it for a number of years now, and I found it to be very flexible It will do everything that file history can do and a lot more. And it's a little bit more laborious to set it up, but it's not impossible, and certainly is a good solution, good solid solution for anybody who wants real-time backups and file versioning on the computer. Let's talk about cloud backup. So I'll pause just for a second and let everybody think about what is the definition of the cloud. And I think one of the best definitions is someone else's computer. And this has some implications if you think about it. You know, it is not something that is owned by you. You do not control that particular device. And that has some important things you have to consider about it. So cloud backup can be a backup solution for sure, because it's your data files that are what is critical. And so you can back up all your data if you have enough cloud storage for all your important files, or you're willing to pay for beyond what you can get for free in cloud storage. Keep in mind, it doesn't back up your operating system or your programs. Some of the benefits of cloud backup, though, are you get off-site. So that is your protection against fire, theft, and those localized dangers that your data is exposed to. You can access your backups from anywhere in the world as long as you can get an internet connection. On some backup solutions in the cloud, you'll get synchronization between computers. So that can be a good thing and a bad thing. If you corrupt a file or you have file encrypting malware hits your computer, it will happily synchronize those changes between all your computers. But you can get real-time backup, and you can get sharing files with other people. And those ones that are asterisked are some cloud backup solutions, such as Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive. There's a whole bunch of them. We'll provide you with those capabilities, but not all free cloud backup will provide you with those capabilities. So cloud backup works, but what if they go out of business? Now, I don't have an awful lot of worry about Google Drive disappearing one day or OneDrive from Microsoft, but what about Dropbox? I don't know anything about that company. How solvent are they? Are they going to just go out of business one day and then all my files that are on their servers disappear? So what's the mitigation? Nothing unique should get stored in the cloud. Any cloud storage, nothing unique stored there, so that I always have a copy somewhere else, most likely on my local computer or a local backup. What if it gets hacked? Now, I think that Google is probably going to be doing a better security job than I could ever do, but it has not been unheard of that they have security issues. And they're certainly a big target. The hackers know that if they can hack into Google Drive or OneDrive from Microsoft, they can get a treasure trove of tons and tons of files from people from all over the world. And this was a security alert that came out from Google in February 2020, where they explained that some videos in Google Photos were incorrectly exported to unrelated users' archives. Not a good thing. So if I had sensitive data that actually got stored onto somebody else's archive and they got access to it, I don't know who it was, but might they have nefarious purposes with my data? I don't know. So what's the mitigation? Encrypt sensitive data. Anything that you store in the cloud, I highly recommend that if it's sensitive data, encrypt it before it gets stored in the cloud. What about speed and performance? So this was a number of years ago. I was on cable modem with 5 megabit per second upload, 30 megabit per second download, and I had a 300 gigabyte per month cap. So to back up 1 terabyte worth of data would have taken 20 days. To restore 1 terabyte would have only taken 3.5 days. And I would have blown my monthly cap, and I would have been paying extra to have the additional data going over the wires for my ISP. So what's the mitigation for that? Don't back up everything. Okay, just back up what's most important. But what about those other files? Just because it's not, your most critical data doesn't mean it's not important. You still want to back it up, but you have to deal with it in a different fashion maybe. So some of the free cloud backup providers, Google Drive is one of the best, I think, in that it gives you 15 gigabytes for free. I use about 8 gigabytes, and I store an awful lot of stuff of my important files that are on Google Drive. You can buy additional space for sure, and they'll give you about 200 gigabytes free or paid for Canadian $48 a year for any additional space. One thing I like to mention here too is you can have as many Google accounts as you want. So Google will not prevent you from having half a dozen Google Drives if you want, each one of them with 15 gigabytes free. There are a lot of other ones out there. So OneDrive from Microsoft, Dropbox, and so forth. So there's a lot of free cloud providers out there. So how does it work? So, if you want to synchronize files between multiple computers, which I do all the time, this is very easy to do. So I do this for when I give presentations at the Ottawa Public Library. I carry a laptop computer with me, and it is automatically synced all my files for my presentations between my desktop computer and my laptop computer. If I make a change while I'm at one of the presentations and save it, by the time I get home, the updated presentation has automatically been synchronized back to my desktop computer. As I modify files on my desktop computer, the next time I bring up my laptop computer, it'll automatically synchronize those changes to those other computers. I find it really, really handy to have that automatic synchronization between multiple computers. So I can have important documents or various files that are in the cloud, and they will be accessible through any internet computer, internet connected computer. So here I have Word document and my passport. And then if I connect to that from another computer anywhere in the world, I can access those documents directly. So how do I use it? If I'm traveling, I might have plane reservations and car reservations and hotel reservations stored in the cloud so that I can access that data from anywhere. If I'm going on a cruise, I might have deck plans. I might have the excursions that are offered on the ship all into the cloud as well, where I can access those documents. Notice that I had my passport in there, sensitive data, so that would be encrypted. The other stuff, probably not all that sensitive, so I wouldn't worry about encrypting it. I can share files with other people through the cloud. So I can have it a one-way share where they can just download and view information, or I can actually set it up with two-way share. So I can do collaborative work where I can give access to people where they can modify the files. It'll get synchronized up to the cloud and then get synchronized back down to my computer. There are commercial cloud backup providers. There's an awful lot of them out there. Backblaze was one of the ones that Hudson Henry in the video clip that I showed, he uses. And it's one of the most popular out there right now. There's other ones, Carbonite, iDrive, and so forth. So most of them will give you more than just raw storage. They know that free options exist for that. So they'll give you tools for automated backup, backing up using a ship drive, which was also one of the things that Hudson Henry talked about, where if he had terabytes and terabytes of data, they'll actually ship him drives with his data rather than have to download all of that recover it over the internet, and then he would just return the shipped drives and get his deposit backs. Synchronization and things like that. So a lot of the commercial cloud backup providers will do an awful lot to make it easier for you to use it as a backup solution. Usually I find most of them, they're looking to get about US $70 a year or more out of people in order to use the services. The capabilities vary wildly between one commercial cloud backup provider and another. Some of them will give you unlimited data for a single device. Some of them will give you a limited amount of data for multiple devices and so forth. So look at the terms and conditions when you're choosing a commercial cloud backup provider. Okay, let's look back and say, well, why not just back up the data to internal or external hard drives, flash drives, or the cloud? Let's see what happens if you have a disaster. So you have a hard drive failure. What do? You have to replace the hard drive. Then you have to reinstall Windows or your operating system of choice. You have to reinstall all your programs. And then maybe about a week later, you're ready to recover your data files from your backup. It can be a really tedious process. It's not impossible, but it can be a really tedious process to get all of that back up and running before you can use your computer and accessing your data. And then keep in mind, did you back up all your data? Remember, this is where my photo editor stores its catalog with the edits on all my photos for the last years. And if I did not think about backing up that, I would be rather upset with myself that I didn't have a backup copy of all of my photo edits. So how do we tackle that? Backing up everything and use what is known as imaging. And I will note at the bottom of the slide there are additional slides in the downloadable PDF file that give you instructions on locking down external storage devices to a specific drive letter. I highly recommend people do that if they're backing up with imaging. So how does a disk image work? It's a snapshot of everything that's on your computer. So it'll be your operating system, your programs, and your data, all of it copied to an external hard drive. So how do you do disaster recovery with imaging? Well, you have your hard drive failure again. Well, you still have to replace the hard drive. But then rather than installing the operating system, the programs, and recovering the data, what you do is you boot your computer from either a flash drive or a DVD that is enabled through the backup program that you choose. And then you boot your computer from that, you run a recovery program, and a couple of hours later, everything gets restored onto your computer. Your operating system, your programs, and your data. So I wrote an article a number of years ago on free options for imaging. And so if you're interested in seeing what was my criteria that I was looking for in a backup program and how I looked at a number of programs and how each of them fulfilled those particular requirements for me. What might be of interest to you in that article is whether it matches with the requirements that you have. It might be different. And so you really have to look at what your requirements are when you're choosing a backup program. So if you're imaging your entire computer, some of the capabilities that you typically will get, full and incremental backups. So full will back up everything, but because that's huge and takes a long time to do, they also have incremental, where it'll only back up changes since the last time the backup ran. You get scheduling, where it can automatically run on your computer on a schedule that suits your needs. You get the disaster recovery, to be able to recover everything on the entire computer with using either that bootable flash drive or a DVD that the program lets you create. Or you can just do file and folder recovery if you don't want to recover absolutely everything. I'll show some examples. I'm just going to breeze through this just to show you how easy it is really to use. So the examples I have here are ease us to do backup. And so when you go into the program, you click on the add backup. You get a new job created, and you can click to rename the job to something you want. Then you choose what is it you want to back up. Most people, it'll be disk. And then it'll bring up a list of all of the disks that are on your computer. You can just select all of the drives that are built into your computer. Click on OK. And then you select where you want the backups to be stored. And then you say where you want it to be stored. So you can use EaseUS Cloud. You can actually use some cloud storage that is provided by that vendor, or network attached storage, or a security zone. Most people, it'll be just local drive. And then you just select on a local drive where you want your backups to be stored. You click on OK. And then there is an options dialog box that you can go into where you can configure a whole raft of things on how the backups actually get handled. The defaults I find are pretty good, but one of the ones you might want to come onto is the backup scheme. And there's where you can actually set up a schedule. So you can have it back it up daily, weekly, whatever. And then you click on start the backup. And that's basically it. So if you want to do a recovery, you select your backup job. In this case, I had a backup job called SSD and D exceptions. And then I click on recover. And then I can choose whether I want to recover entire disks or partitions, or do I want to just recover individual files and folders. And if I've run multiple backups, I'll have version history, so I'll have the full backup as well as any of the incrementals. I can choose a particular date that I want to recover from. Under the tools, create emergency disk is where I actually create that emergency flash drive or DVD that allows me to recover in an event of a disaster. So you can choose the location for it, for the emergency disk, either a flash drive or a DVD. I recommend you be really careful when you create a flash drive as your emergency disk. You don't want to accidentally select the wrong device, such as your backup disk, and because it's going to wipe out all of the data that's on it and turn it into a recovery drive. So this overview really covers the basics. There's an awful lot that can be configured. Highly recommend that you read the manuals. I've read the manuals on a couple of the imaging software that is out there, and they all seem to be pretty clear. They'll really take you step by step through the process and explain all of the options so you can decide what options make sense to you. So there are some problems with imaging. So a month of my backup, this goes back a little while ago. I'm now up to over a terabyte on a full backup, but this is back a while ago. A month of my backups, I had the full backup was 713 gigabytes, and then 30 days of incremental backups was only 123 gigabytes total. So for that full month, 836 gigabytes of space was required on the backup drive for the backups. So that's a considerable amount of space. So what's the mitigation? Well, external hard drives aren't really that expensive. So, here in Canada, we can get a 4 terabyte drive for about 115 bucks. And the other thing that mitigates that is that the incremental backups are relatively small. Another problem with imaging, full image backups can take a long time. Mine right now, it's about 2.5 hours to do a full backup. Mitigations to that, well, the incremental backups that run for me every day, they usually run in under 5 minutes. And then you can also schedule backups to run unattended. So I have mine run at 1 o'clock in the morning. And so even when it cycles through and wants to run another full backup, do I care if it takes from 1 till 4 o'clock in the morning? Not really. I'm not using my computer, and it'll just run unattended. I think that there's more than one solution is the best way to go about doing it. So backing up just your data is not a bad solution as a part of the solution. So using file history or free file sync gives you near real-time backup as you make changes to your files or as you add changes onto your computer, add files, you'll get those backups immediately. Versioning can give you really long recovery periods so that if you're working on a document and you say, well, I was working on this file for the last few weeks and I really think that I deleted something out of this file 2 weeks ago and I really want to get that back, you're able to get it back really easily. And potentially even years ago, when you had an older version of that file, you can actually recover that particular version that you want. Cloud backup, some of the benefits of it, accessing it from any computer in the world. I find that to be really, really useful. Sharing files with others rather than have to email files to people makes it really, really handy to be able to take any file and just share a link and then they can download it directly to the computer. Synchronizing between computers can be really, really useful so that if you have multiple devices, you can have the files automatically kept in sync between all your devices. And then that real-time backup I find really useful, as well as file history giving it to you. You can get real-time backup in cloud as well. And then backing up everything. So image backup, and that gives me disaster recovery for the entire computer, which file history and cloud backup will not give me. In addition to be able to recover the entire computer, I can recover individual files and folders, so I don't have to wipe out everything that's on my computer just to do a recovery. Apple Mac OS users. Now, I'm not a Mac user, so this is just something that I'm a little bit jealous about. As I understand it, they have Time Machine, and it automatically will give you hourly backups for the last 24 hours, daily backups for the last month, weekly backups for all previous months, and the oldest are deleted when space is required automatically. And my understanding is you just plug in an external hard drive. The OS will ask you, oh, do you want to use this for Time Machine? You click on yes, and you're done. It just works. You can actually start your computer from Time Machine disks. So if you have complete failure on a hard drive or on a computer, you go out and buy a brand new one, you plug in your old Time Machine disk, it'll recognize that it's a Time Machine disk and ask if you want to restore from that. And if you say yes, a while later, you'll be back up and running with everything you had when you were starting out. Now, when it comes to actually doing recovery other than entire disaster recovery, I have no clue how it's done. So I highly recommend that people take a look at recovery processes as well. Let's talk about a couple of other things. Offsite backup. So this is really important. It mitigates some of the rarer dangers such as fire, theft, and file encrypting malware. Because it's rarer dangers, I don't worry about it being as frequent. So I, for example, do an offsite backup about once a month. So if I have a disaster where I have a fire in my house or a theft where somebody stole my computer as well as my backup drive, which is constantly attached to it, then I might lose up to a month's worth of work. But I think that that's a rare enough occasion or likelihood that I can live with that to actually have to recover some other way my data over the last month. Where do you store that backup disk? Well, a desk drawer at work or a friend's house or something like that is a good location. Some people think about putting it into a safety deposit box, but I think that that's probably not the greatest. It's a little bit more awkward to do it. You're not likely to do it as frequently, and you wouldn't want to have to do a recovery on a Friday night and have to wait until the bank opens up on Monday morning. Because that drive is going to be stored somewhere else outside of your control, I highly recommend that you encrypt any offsite backups. And so some external drives will include optional full disk encryption. Western Digital drives in particular seem to be very common for that. Seagate, some drives include the option for doing full disk encryption. Some of them don't. Most of the imaging software includes an option to do encryption. So you can actually encrypt the backup job and not worry about doing full disk encryption on the drive itself. One thing of note is file history doesn't easily allow offsite backup. A file history drive really expects to be constantly connected to your computer so that it can do those real-time backups. So how many backups should people have? I think you need backups in at least 3 places. So your main one is on your computers, your working files that you're working on day to day. You want a local backup using either file history or image backups. And that allows you to do it frequently. And certainly in terms of file history, I have it set to every 10 minutes that it's looking for new or changed files. It does provide protection from accidental deletion, disk failure, and so forth. It doesn't provide protection from things like your house burning down or an electrical failure that fries your computer as well as your backup disk, which is connected to it. So for that, you want offsite backup. So you could use that cloud or image backups that are stored on an external hard drive that gets stored somewhere else. And that gives you that protection from fire, theft, electrical surging, and so forth. Think about your needs. Choose a solution that's right for you. It's not going to be the same solution that's right for me. So think about how frequently you need to back up. My girlfriend backs up her computer once a week. Now, I've warned her that if a failure happens, she can lose up to a week's worth of her changes on her computer. She's decided that she's willing to live with that, and that's her choice. Me, I'm not willing to live with a chance of losing data that is a week old. So I do backups every day, as well as incremental backups of my important files to both the cloud as well as to file history drive connected to my computer. Test your backup processes. We don't back up for backup's sake. We back up so we can recover. So verify that you can actually recover your files. Now, I don't suggest that you actually blow away your drive C on a Windows computer to verify that you can actually recover from a backup. But you might want to actually back up, or try to do a recovery of an individual file, for example. So verify that you can recover at least files and folders on your computer, and more or less trust that you can back up entire partitions. If you have the ability to see if you can recover entire partitions, all the better, but at least verify that you can recover files and folders. So on your image backup solutions, make sure you create that emergency recovery disk and flash drive and test that you can actually boot from that. I had a process that I thought was a good process for backup, and I had never actually tried booting from the recovery media. I tried one time after having a failure, and I all of a sudden discovered that I was not able to access my backup drive while I was booted from the recovery media. Now, I got around it because that particular recovery software allowed me to access recovery drive or a backup drive that was attached to another computer over the network. And so I was able to put my backup drive on my son's computer and then access it over the network. And it took a little bit longer, but it was actually recoverable. But that taught me an important lesson, to make sure that I can actually recover from that bootable drive, at least recovering some individual files and folders. So I think there are 3 important strategies that everybody should really consider. One is make sure you back up. 2, make sure you back up. 3, make sure you back up. Just for anybody who's interested in the Ottawa PCUG group, before I take questions and things like that, we do have monthly meetings that are open to members and non-members. We welcome guests at any time. Links to the Zoom meetings are on our website. The main meeting is on the second Wednesday of the month. So this evening we're having a presentation on smartphone apps. And on other Wednesday evenings, we have a Q&A session for an hour. Everybody is welcome. If you want to join the Ottawa PCUG group, it's only $20 a year, and that's Canadian dollars. And if you join before the end of the month, you'll get 2 years for the price of one. We have a lot of resources that are available, most of which are available to anybody, including anybody who comes across it on our website. We do have a couple of member-only services that are available as well. Some additional material in the downloadable PDF file, locking an external drive to a single drive letter. That's actually important because if you, as you remove and add drives onto a Windows computer, it can, in certain circumstances, end up changing drive letter that gets assigned to it. If you do this with your backup drive and your backup program is set to, for example, back up your files to drive D, and then all of a sudden it becomes drive E, it's not going to be able to save your backups to it correctly. So it's really important to lock down your external drive that you use for backup to a single drive letter. I have more information in there about using file history in Windows 11 and the workarounds that I mentioned in the slide, going into a little bit more detail. And then I talk at length in the additional slides on using Free File Sync as a replacement for file history, how to set that up in order to get you all of the capabilities that file history gives you. And that's all, folks. So I did paste it in the chat, but you can do a screen cap right now if you wanted to pick up that PDF file rather than waiting for it to be delivered to you by Judy at some point. And with that, I would like to open it up for any questions.
That was great. Couldn't ask for a better beginning workshop to overview backup for this whole month. So Chris, that was really terrific.
Absolutely. And John, when is it you're giving your Free File Sync presentation?
26th.
You got it. Be there or be square.
Free file sync is great. It's a wonderful program, very flexible, free and open source. And one of the charms, or two of the charms of it that I didn't find in many other backup programs, it has the ability to do synchronization to and from a website over FTP, as well as to some of the cloud storage providers, such as Google Drive and OneDrive. It can actually do synchronization there as well.
Cool. A question about, what about differential backups?
I don't do differential backups. Differential backups do all of the changes that occurred since the full backup was run, as opposed to the last time the backup was run. The idea of differential backups, you lose two capabilities. One is saving space because, or speed of the backup, because it will grow ever increasingly lengthy and larger backups as you get more and more days beyond when your full backup was run. The other thing is you miss the ability to back up the in-between dates. So if I just give an example, say you're backing up every day, and your first of the month you have the full backup, and then the second the second of the month you have an incremental backup, and the third of the month an incremental, and so forth. If I get to the 5th of the month and I want to recover a file that existed on the 3rd of the month, no problem. I have all those incrementals. If I do differential, it only has the full and the differential. So by the time I get to the 5th of the month, it basically is undone all, or it hasn't preserved the files that existed on the 3rd. So I think incremental gives you much more granularity in your recoverability. The backups run a lot quicker because they are only the changes since the last time the previous incremental ran. So personally, I like that. But all of the programs do give you the capability to do differential if that works for you.
Okay, this person says, I must not be doing file history backup because my computer is asking me to add a drive. So am I to understand that the additional file history backup requires another drive, like an external drive? I do have an external drive attached to my desktop, but apparently it is not recognized as the file history backup.
If it's complaining about the fact that it has not seen your file history drive in a period of time and you should plug it in or else it's going to stop backing up, that means that at some point in time file history was configured on your computer. And if you don't know what the drive was that was doing it, I would recommend going into file history under settings and tell it to stop using the drive. If you can't find the drive that actually has the file history on it, tell it to stop using the drive and then set it up brand new with an external hard drive attached to your computer at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. I just checked my cloud backup on my 2 Windows computers and they are in sync. Hooray for cloud backup. He said he's flying the flag for cloud backup.
It definitely is, and I think it's a very important partial solution to backup.
And you mentioned about checking your files to make sure they actually are where you think they are backing up. And I always suggest that create a document and just short and sweet and to the point. And as it's come time for it to back up, wait a few hours the next day, go look for it. Make sure it's there. You don't want to be backing up and finding out your stuff's not there.
Yeah,
that does happen.
And my point about knowing where all your data is goes beyond that, because it really comes down to the idea that you have programs on your computer that are backing up things on your behalf to locations that you maybe do not realize, such as Thunderbird. You know, it will create all your emails in a location that is not obvious.
Okay. And I imagine that the majority of the people on at this meeting have not had any hard drive failure. I've had 2. So it does happen unexpectedly. Both of them, I was getting ready for the Southwest Conference in San Diego. And if I had not backed up, I would have had to cancel the conference and return the money. And we would have been out of pocket to pay, the Town and Country Hotel down there. So don't think it's not going to happen to me.
And think of that Hudson Henry video where he accidentally formatted 11 terabytes of data. His business would have been out of business if he had not been able to recover that.
Jerry Crow, you have a question. Oh, I have one more. I got two about encryption. One is specific. How do you encrypt a file? For example, an Excel spreadsheet or a Word file. Do you need to encrypt it again if you edit the file? And the other question was, how do you encrypt before you send it up to the cloud?
Yeah, the first one, you can use the built-in encryption. Encryption in Microsoft Office documents used to be garbage. It is actually now very good encryption that is built in. So you can use it. And the way it works is that when you open the file, you'll be prompted for the password. You can then edit the file. When you save it, it will automatically re-encrypt that data. So you can then just copy the file to the cloud. How you encrypt data for other data, or you can do it for Word documents and so forth if you want to do it outside of that. You can encrypt outside of the program. Goes a little bit beyond what I plan to talk about. We have had presentations, I believe, at Wednesday workshops talking about encryption. And so there are a number of other solutions that you can look to. Encrypted zip files is one example where you can encrypt a file into a zip file with a password and then store that encrypted zip file in the cloud.
Thank you. Jerry Crow, you're on.
Jerry, you muted.
He's looking.
Oh, there. Okay.
Yeah, he has to wait for the Oz to grant that permission, and they do now.
Yes, I've got it now. I didn't have it before. I want to make a couple of comments. First of all, I want to say too, Chris, I do presentations on backup myself. I have not presented to this group, but I do. And this is by far and away the best presentation I've ever seen on backing up, and the most comprehensive. Second, I do all my backups locally to drives attached via USB. I don't put anything in the cloud. But I will say that I use the safe deposit box. I put a USB full of data in there every now and then. The two things, I'm really glad to see that you put test in there, because I've encountered products, not recently, and given presentations, and I always tell people, be sure you test that you can make a restore, do a restore, verify that you can restore a file. And the last thing, the best thing I've ever heard about backups is, if you don't back up your data, you don't own it. You're trusting it to fate.
That's a good point. Yeah, and the idea behind testing your processes and so forth is so important. I've had a number of people in the user group who have come up to me and said, well, I've got backups. When I bought this external hard drive, it came with a backup program, and now I need it, and I have no clue how to actually access the backups. And if you don't test it, then it's a useless backup. My mantra is, we don't back up for backup's sake. We back up so we can recover. So make sure you can recover.
And also, was it a free program, or was it a program that it's a paid program and it just came with a year's worth of using it? And have they paid for the second or subsequent years? I had that with class with antivirus. I'd say, what do you have? And they would say, and I knew Best Buy shipped them. And I said, how long have you had your computer? Oh, a year and a half. Did you pay at a year's? No. So
yeah. I'm a big advocate for free software. And in terms of backup, you can do this all for free. I mean, the companies like EaseUS to do backup and so forth, they do have paid versions, and there are some benefits for sure to using the paid versions. But look at it to see whether you really need to pay for it. And in many cases, the free version will work just perfectly fine for you.
And we have had a presentation about that program. Saul, your question, comment?
So I have two, and one I'll mention first, but you can answer it later, is for John Kennedy, is if he has any suggestions for backup for Linux. Anyway, but getting back to Chris, I'm a fan of free file sync. I agree with you on that. One thing it does is it has the ability to do a verify of the copying it's doing during that process. I don't know that any of the other software you mentioned does that. So you might want to comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely on the imaging software, they do include the capability of verifying an image file after the fact. Yes, actually, with Ease Us to do backup, you can actually have it verify the backup as soon as it runs. I don't bother with that because it is highly reliable and it basically doubles the amount of time it takes to do a backup. But I do periodically verify a backup. So every couple of months or so, probably easier than that, probably twice a year, I will actually go in and do a verify on the backups. And I've never had it fail before that it came back with a problem. I assume that all of the backup software will have some capability somewhere to be able to verify your backups. And that's a good thing, but the better way of verifying it, quite frankly, is just try to do a file recovery. If you have a corruption anywhere in the backup file, if you try to do a recovery, it's almost certainly going to fail. So that's my best way of verifying it, is just do a partial recovery at some point.
iCloud is my, iDrive, I'm sorry, is my cloud backup. I've been using it almost since they started. And I back up every day. And every day, immediately afterwards, I get a pop-up that says this many files were eligible to be backed up. These many files were backed up. So it's giving me instant response on, yes, it did work. And I'm hoping that you all who use some kind of cloud backup get something like that. Maybe not instantly like I do, but at least get some verification that they reached their destination.
Yeah, just one point on that too, which is interesting, is the value in paying for commercial software as opposed to the free version. Ease Us, you get email notifications that you can set up, but only on the paid version. And I find that really important. I get an email every morning telling me whether it passed or failed the backup. And so if I was using the free version, I would have to just go and check and see, look on my backup drive and see, was the file created, last night at 1:03 a.m. Whereas I do have a paid version of the program, and so I get email notifications. So that's just an example of where you'll get some added benefit if you are willing to pay some money for a particular solution.
Steve Parker.
Well, wait a second, because Saul asked a second question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And it's a short one. Make sure you're with us next Wednesday for Learning Linux, as we are talking about backup. And then be with us on the 26th, because we're talking about backup, but we're all into cross-platform. So the next 2 weeks, next week for sure Linux, and the next week it'll be for everybody, Linux included. We're talking backup this month.
And John recently has given his free file sync Speakers Bureau presentation to 2 groups. So if you would like a presentation, send me a form and off we'll go. Mr. Steve.
Yeah, hi, Chris. You do a full backup once a month, right?
About that.
And then you do an incremental every day after that?
Yeah.
So
actually, I just recently...
So if you want to restore the day after your full backup, you then have to have it go through all the incrementals from the end of the month all the way to the second day of the month. Is that right?
Yeah, the program itself does that by itself, though. So if I was to pick up, so say I'm backing up every day, it started on the 1st of the month and it runs to the 30th of the month, and I decide that I want to recover from the 15th. I just choose that from the pick list that I want to recover from the 15th, and then it automatically works out what files it has to look at in order to be able to recover from that.
Well, also, the entire month, all those incrementals, if anything happens to any of them, you've lost everything from that one on, right?
Yes. Yeah,
there is exactly why you need differentials. You do a full backup once a month, you do differentials every week once, then you do the incrementals every day, so that the incrementals only go back a week. So if you wanted to restore the day right after your full backup, it would go to that differential and then just however many 3 or 4 incrementals before that. So it would only need like 3 or 4 files as opposed to 30 files for the entire month.
Yeah, I've found that the programs that I've used a couple of backup programs, and they've been highly reliable. But I take your point on that. If I was really concerned at that level, what I would probably end up doing is doing 2 backup jobs every day and doing with incrementals and doing it to 2 separate devices. Full backup on the first day of the month and then incrementals for the rest of the month. And I would just duplicate the job and run it twice. One at 1 o'clock in the morning, one at 2 o'clock in the morning, or something like that is the approach that I would take personally. But it's a good point that if you have any corruption in your backup files at all, what are you going to do about it? And the backup programs all work the same way. My understanding is that if you have a corrupted incremental, then it is going to be corrupted you're not going to be able to recover anything that was backed up after that through your backup set. Same is going to apply if you do a differential backup. If your differential backup is corrupted, then you can't recover anything but the original full backup.
But it still does make it faster to restore that second day incremental.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because if you've got 30 incrementals, it has to go through each one to rebuild it back to what it would have been just a day after the full backup.
Yeah, my point on that would be more along the lines of that. I very, very rarely ever go back to my ESUS backups to do recoveries. So my important files, I can usually recover them from the cloud. Or my file history backup, or I'm actually backing up with file history as well as free file sync, so I can recover individual files or folders from those a lot quicker than I can recover them from my image backups. So if I do have to do a recovery from an image backup, do I really worry if it takes an extra 15 or 20 minutes or even an hour to do it? Not really. In that it's so rare that I actually need to do that I'm not concerned about the time on that.
Okay. Well, the other thing was I noticed that you had the documents and videos and music and all those in your C drive. If you put them on your D drive as part of your data drives, you don't need to image them because you can just treat them, copy them as regular data files.
Yep. So it just depends on how you want to do those backups. So if you're actually moving the libraries from one drive to another as part of Windows itself, then Windows will recognize that for file history as well. So it will back up those libraries automatically. If you're using free file sync or any other means to do the backup and recovery, you just point to that other location and back them up from that location.
Diane.
Yes, I was the one who asked the question about file history, and I did what you said. I just wanted to say thank you. It was turned off. And it was already on a dedicated external drive, so I turned it back on, and who knows why it was turned off.
Yeah,
Those Grammys.
I sort of blame that on just Microsoft oddities
Yeah.
for things like that to happen. They don't happen with any particular rhyme or reason for the most part. But yeah, if it was just turned off, if you have the drive connected to your computer and you turn it back on again, I presume it will pick up from where it left off.
Yeah,
But
it
if
looked
you
like it was going to. It says
okay.
automatically backing up files.
Okay, so you should be good to go for now. So you'll just have lost the ability to recover anything during that period where it was actually turned off.
Oh, that's okay. I have 100 backups. And I wanted to say I use iDrive as well, like Judy, and I love it. If somebody's looking for something, I would suggest that. And Judy, I want that background that you and John have.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll send it to you. Richard from Australia,
Yes, just warn people to be very careful with cloud backup. If it's paid, it's a paid service, because if something goes wrong with an auto pay, you may find your backups are gone without you realizing it.
That's a good point. Now, I've looked into this a little bit, but only in terms of Microsoft OneDrive. And the official word out of Microsoft on that is that if you stop paying, they will continue to maintain your files for a period of time. I believe it's something like 3 months. You can actually automatically get your files back if you start paying again. After 3 months, I think there's a further 3 months that you can actually start paying again, and they will be recoverable, but not from an automated fashion. So yeah, that's a good point on paid services. Is if you stop paying, who knows what happens to it, and you're really at the whim of the vendor.
Yes, we had a large organization here in Australia that had a paid Microsoft account, except the person's credit card was being used was made redundant.
Oh no.
So they didn't find that it had been not paid. And of course, the emails reminding them went to his email, which was no longer there. And it took them a week to get their system back.
Wow.
That was a large health organization that happened to.
Yeah.
oh, Lord. John Sherrill.
Hello, good afternoon. Eric, a very good presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do have one question. I use, my mind just slipped, in the Microsoft online One Backup, whatever it's called. And
OneDrive?
what's that? Yeah, OneDrive.
Yep.
I go out in the field where I do not have internet access, and I operate a amateur radio. And so I use files that have been uploaded to the drive, the OneDrive. I want to be able to stop using OneDrive and pull all my files, including the applications, what I have, back to my local drive. But that will affect the other computers that I have also on OneDrive. And for whatever reason, I did not catch it when I installed the operating system, and now I'm stuck with OneDrive. Is there a way to be able to stop using OneDrive and recover all the files?
You can definitely manually recover them from your OneDrive. So if you just go to OneDrive on the web, you can actually access everything that is stored in the cloud. So the first thing I would do is make sure you get down all of your files and put them in a different location on your local computer. Once you've done that, then you don't have to worry about if they get removed from other computers and things like that, and from the cloud, you have a safe copy somewhere locally. So that's the first thing I would do. Then there are processes for disabling OneDrive, and Microsoft has some documentation, and third parties definitely have some documentation on how to do this in a manner that is least likely to be disruptive. In other words, losing data. So I would recommend doing a bit of Googling on that to make sure you do it. Make sure your data is, any information you find is up to date. Microsoft has, in their infinite wisdom, changed OneDrive, the way it functions, and what the ramifications are of certain actions numerous times over the years. So make sure that any instructions you read are pretty current to make sure you don't end up losing data. But again, if you just go onto the web and go to access OneDrive there, copy down all of the files that you can find to some other location on your local computer, then worry about disabling OneDrive. But it definitely can be disabled and even uninstalled from your computer.
Where would that location be? Drive B, drive F?
I would do it anywhere other than its original location. So the original location is going to be under, for example, on my computer, it'd be c:\users/ctaylor/OneDrive. And then below that, you would have documents and things like that. So that would be the original location probably for everything that you see in the OneDrive on the web. And I would just copy it to any other location on your computer. Make sure you have a backup in some other location as well, either an image backup or backing it up to cloud service somewhere else, or file history or whatever, to make sure you have multiple copies locally, and then start thinking about disabling OneDrive.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Gone for questions for Chris. Oh, Joel has one.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I didn't see the notice come up. I just going to remark that I got frustrated a little bit with how long it took to do some of the external drive backups, but I now have a desktop and a laptop that support the 3.1 USB or higher. And if you're willing to pay more money for it, you can get external drives that will run almost as fast as native hard drive in the machine these days. You can get I've got a 4 terabyte Crucial X6 that costs $280 that basically rivals or almost as fast as an internal hard drive. You know, close to, I don't know, 4,000 to 6,000 megabits per second, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, that can be important in a lot of circumstances. Some circumstances I find it doesn't really matter that much, because if it takes, multiple hours, if it's done in the middle of the night or whatever, who really cares? But yeah, if you get a fast external hard drive, if you get into Thunderbolt 4 or even Thunderbolt 5 now, you can get really, really screaming fast speeds on that if that's important to you, for sure. Good idea.
Mr. Kennedy, will you walk us off, please?
Can't do it like you want me to do it with that little guy in this bottom corner, but
I know. Oh, Jerry Crow raised his hand.
Jerry.
Real quickly, I can't put it in the chat. Judy, would you please send me that data backup background image as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Now, what if I say it's a charged one? You got it from me, Judy, so you have to ask me first.
That's right. Do we need to pay you?
Oh, probably not.
Okay. Oh, do you want your same amount of pay as you usually get?
Yeah.
Got it.
All of the backgrounds that we use are all found DuckDuckGo image search for free to use. So I have to make sure that, because we put these on the web with YouTube, so we can't have any copyrighted stuff. So these are all free to use, but we can get it to you.
Yeah.
I want to thank Chris for an excellent start to backup month. I told Judy that there is so much that we could be sharing that it could take a couple months. And what I'm going to say is, at the end of this month, after we've done our next 2 weeks of presentations, we can add, we don't have to stick to March. If you have a program that you like, that you want to do a little bit more in depth, Chris did a great job of an overall, and the next 2 weeks we're going to be focusing on some different backing up tools. But if you have something or can expand on what has been presented, please let Judy and me know, and we will schedule you for a future workshop and continue, because as you know, Chris started us off, 3 things you got to remember: backup, backup, and backup. And so we've got to keep this in people's minds so that they don't lose what's important to you. So thank you so much. We'll be back next week with Learning Linux, but some of the stuff could be appropriate to non-Linux users, and definitely the workshop on the 26th will be for all users. So attend that. Thanks, Bill, to be here in case something came up. Thanks, Judy, for taking care of the questions, and thank all of you for making use of the benefit of your group's membership into APCUG, and we will see you the next time.
And March 31st is actually World Backup Day, and the tagline is, "Don't be an April Fool."
And
so if you are not a backer-upper, now's the time to start thinking about it and schedule maybe your first one on March 31st and go, yes, she's hounded me again.
And don't be surprised that on the 26th, you might be able to take the pledge at the workshop and do that. Plus, we may be doing a survey to find out what all different versions of backups people are doing.